Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Adam. This is Vancity Audi, and I am back at Racing Greed today for a video that I have been planning on doing for months now. This video is specifically made for all of those watching this video in British Columbia, Canada. It is a province in which Vancouver is located in, the major city that I live near. We have a big problem here, and that is the terrible, terrible quality of our pump gas. So everybody, forums, Facebook, regardless of where you are bitching and moaning and complaining, saying this fuel's better than the other, this fuel's worse than the other, I use this because it's the best. No one has ever put in the time or effort to actually document it and see which is actually the best fuel. I am going to do this to the best of my ability today with the help of the guys here at Racing Greed. We're back on their dyno, but this time I brought my B8 S4. This car is completely stock. We have not done anything to the tuning side of things. It has a set of brakes on it, it has an ethanol sensor, and that's it. Everything else stock. So it's a good baseline car to use to see how this fuel works. What we're going to be doing is testing 6 different types of fuel that we think are kind of the gold standard, or the ones that people use claiming it's the best fuel. We have fuel all the way from Oliver, BC, near Area 27. That is a 94 Petro Ultra. That's supposed to be the best pump gas you can get in BC. So we're gonna test that. Then there is the US 92 Chevron. So just south of us is Washington State, and they have better fuel than us. So a lot of Canadians, obviously before the pandemic, would drive down and fill up using their 92 US fuel from Chevron or Shell, and they had better results. We're gonna test that. We also have Chevron 94 here, which is an ethanol-free fuel that we get here in BC. Shell 91, which is also an ethanol-free ethanol-free fuel here from BC as well. And then I have an Esso 91 as the lowest grade, for at least that's what we think is the lowest grade. The baseline run that we're going to be doing this run on is what I'm using right now, which is Chevron 94 with an ethanol blend of E17. So I've put in, I don't even remember what it is, 10 or 11 liters or a couple gallons, a little more than a couple gallons of E85 into a full tank of Chevron 94. And I've been doing logs on the back roads, and this mixture is providing as good performance as you're going to get with as little timing reduction. So run after run after run, we're going to test the car. I'm going to get timing logs. We're going to see how much timing's being pulled. I'll show you guys that. And we're also going to get horsepower and torque figures on this Mustang dyno. In previous videos, I have shown you guys the dyno jet calibration numbers on this dyno. Today, we are going straight off what the Mustang dyno says with no calibration, no variables changing, just the numbers off the dyno. I am really, really excited for this, for these dyno results, and for the timing results more so I can see how well these fuels are performing and finally put an end to the debate. Here are all the fuels nicely stored in their jerry cans. I had some guys help me out. Troy from the Vancouver Audi Club, thank you so very much for grabbing this for us. This is supposed to be the gold standard here in BC, the Petro Ultra 94 up in Oliver, BC at Area 27. Then we have the US 92 Chevron, we have the Chevron 94, we have the Shell 91, and the Esso 91. Now you may have noticed, fill second. I'm going to talk you through what that means right now. So I'm at an extremely busy Shell station in the lower mainland, and I just wanted to walk you guys through how we are going through filling up these jerry cans to make sure they're all equal. On pumps like this, they're shared with one nozzle. So I want to make sure that we're not getting a mixture of any of the previous fill-ups with an 87 or an 89. So what I'm doing is I'm doing 15 to 20 liters of the 91 straight into the car first. Then once I've done that, then I fill up the jerry can to ensure that there is no remnants of the 87 or the 89 mixed in with the 91. 22 liters into the tank before it gets into the jerry can to clean the lines. Here is the graph and the power using that Chevron 94 with an E17 blend. These are Mustang numbers, untouched, straight from the dyno, no calibration. 294 wheel horsepower and 283 foot-pounds of torque. There are the curves, and now I'll go over the actual logs and what type of timing retardation we saw. Here's the log of that run utilizing Chevron 94 blended with 17% ethanol. We have a red line in this car of about 68.45. I'm going to show you guys the intake air temp first. That is in Celsius. We start out at 33 degrees at the beginning of the run. By red line, we are seeing 40.5 degrees for an intake air temp. We made sure that on these logs, that on the pulls in the dyno, if we saw one run where the IATs were skyrocketing, we made sure that that wasn't the run we used, because that's an unfair disadvantage to our logs and to this comparison. We only use the logs and the power that we made on the runs with equivalent intake air temps. This is the ignition correction. We see zero ignition correction up to about 4,900 RPM. Then we see 1.5 degrees being pulled from cylinder 6. It gets a bit worse at 6,300, where we see 4.25 degrees being pulled of cylinder 6 and 2.75 out of cylinder 2. And it gets a bit better by red line, where we are seeing 2.25 out of cylinder 2 and 4 degrees out of cylinder 6. So now that we've done that first run and we have our baseline number, we need to actually drain the fuel. Now with the PowerLink system from Integrated Engineering, there's a very cool feature where you can drain fuel. It's going to actually pump the fuel out of the car. So this is an aftermarket ethanol sensor that we've installed with some quick connects on the fuel line. We're just going to be tapping into it. Where is it? There it is. We're just going to be tapping into it and running it straight into a jerry can to drain as much fuel out of the tank as we can. Second fuel we have, or the first to compare to our baseline, is a Petro Ultra 94. This has a maximum of a 10% ethanol blend in it from the actual pump, and I will be showing the actual manual test results right after this. Here are the results of the first test with this Petro-Canada Ultra 94. And we are sitting exactly at 10% ethanol. You guys can see that. Let's see if I can get this close enough for you guys. See the line right there? You can see the distinct line between where the water is and the fuel is. That shows the actual ethanol percentage. So this Petro 94 comes in at 10% ethanol. Here is our first comparison of the original pull I did with that E17 blend with our Petro Ultra 94. You can already see the difference. 1 pounds-foot less, 6 horsepower less at the wheels. And there you can see the graphs. You can see the dip in torque all the way through. You can see the horsepower, just less all the way through. We'll go through the timing as well as the timing retardation we saw now. Here's the data log using Petro-Canada Ultra 94. The intake air temps start at 34.5 degrees and they work their way up to 38.25 degrees, so a bit cooler than our run using Chevron 94 blended with E17, but most certainly close enough that they were on an equal playing field. Here we see the ignition correction, where we see the run being great up until, where is that? About 5,200 RPM this time, where we see 2.75 degrees out of cylinder 6. Then cylinder 2 jumps in with 3.25 degrees. Then cylinder 5 jumps in with 2.75 degrees. And then it gets really quite bad at 6,300, where we get 4.5 out of cylinder 6, 2 out of cylinder 5, 2.25 out of cylinder 2, and then cylinder 1 jumps in on the party as well near redline, seeing corrections in 4 of the cylinders, -3, -2, -1.5, and -4.25 at redline. Our second fuel to compare to our baseline is our American 92 from Chevron. This one is the go-to in the lower mainland for people that care about performance, that want to use pump gas, because we are pretty damn confident from previous logs and previous tests that this is actually better than our local 94. Here we have the Chevron 92 from Washington State. We'll get in nice and close for you guys. Looks like it's coming in at about 7.5%. That's 7.5% ethanol for the Chevron 92 from Washington State. Here is the graph of the Chevron 92 from the States, maxed out at 285 wheel horsepower and 278 for the torque. That is the previous run on the Petro-94 Ultra. And there are the curves. You can see the slight deviations, pretty darn close, but where you're seeing the big difference is higher up in the rev range. That is where you're seeing the difference in timing, which I will go over right now. Here is the log using Chevron 92 from Washington State. Starts out at 36 degrees for an intake air temp, and by the end of the run climbs up to 41.25 degrees. So slightly warmer than the last fuel, but still not enough to really throw it off. Now this is the first run of many where you are going to start seeing a lot of correction. And this time it starts earlier on. It starts at 2100, just shy of 2200 RPM in 2 cylinders, 2.5 degrees and 2 degrees at a cylinder 2 and 3. And from there it only gets worse. It gets worse and worse and worse until you get all the way up in the RPMs to 5600 RPMs, where we are finally seeing correction in all 6 cylinders. Look at that. 3.5, 6.25, 0.75, 3.25, 4.25, and 4 degrees at a cylinder 6. That's at 5800 RPM, and then gets a little better as we get near to red line. And at the end near red line, we are seeing not nearly as much, 1, 3, half a degree, 1.5, 1.75, and 1 degree in cylinder 6 out of this Chevron 92 from Washington State. So far we've really seen what we expected to see. We knew that that baseline was as good as we were going to get for performance on this car. We're seeing peak timing. We're seeing the most power we're going to get out of it in its stock form. Then it dropped a bit on the 94 Ultra, dropped a little bit more on the Chevron 92 from the States, from Washington State. Now we're getting into the biggest part of this video for most BC locals that use these fuels. The comparison that everyone moans and gripes and bitches about is Shell 91 better or is Chevron 94 better? As I've stated earlier, both of them are ethanol-free fuels. Some people complain that the Chevron 94 isn't as consistent a fuel from one station to the next, and other people claim that Shell 91 is their go-to. I have seen crap fuel from both Shell 91 and Chevron 94, but my personal opinion is Chevron 94 is a higher octane fuel and runs better in most cars, whereas other people, other performance shops swear by Shell 91, and we are about to tell. Here we have our Chevron 94, which is sold as an ethanol-free fuel, and what do you know? 0. No ethanol in that bad boy, pure gasoline for the Chevron 94. Here is a comparison of our Chevron 94 ethanol-free fuel compared to US, Washington State, Chevron 92 premium fuel, and you've lost even more. You drop down from 285 down to 281 and from 278 to 273 for the torque. There are the curves. You can see just a little, pulling a little bit out here, pulling a little bit out in the mid-range, and then just ever so slightly up top. Slowly but surely, it's getting lower and lower and lower in those power figures. Here we have the log utilizing Chevron 94. We start out at 33.75 for the intake air temp, and we get all the way up to 40.5 degrees for a max intake air temp. Now for the ignition correction, and it starts getting ugly. We start seeing it as early as 2300 RPM, -2 in cylinder 2, -0.25 in cylinder 6, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and I will show you where it is the absolute worst. And that is at 6300 RPM in all 6 cylinders, -2.5, -6.25 in cylinder 2, -2.25 cylinder 3,
0.25 cylinder 4, 4.75 in cylinder 5, and 2.75 in cylinder 6. So that's at 6,300 RPM. It stays pretty bad, but then gets a little better by the end of the run. And at the end of the run at 6,900 RPM, we are seeing 4.75, 6 degrees, 1.2 or 1.5, 0.25, -4, and -2 corrections out of all 6 cylinders.
There you have a comparison with 3 different fuels versus my mixture of Chevron 94 and 17% ethanol. From one fuel to the next fuel to the next, we've lost horsepower, we've lost torque, and we've lost timing. Now I hate to do it to you guys, but this video is already long enough, so you're gonna have to wait to part 2 of this video, in which I will release it in a few days, and you will see the remaining fuels, Shell 91, Esso 91, and I refill the car with my Chevron 94 and E17 mixture to see if we can regain all that power, torque, and timing that we've lost. In a few days' time, guys, I'll see you again. Until then, take care.